Hello everyone. Design is intelligence made visible. Mentoring hundreds of people for design, our special guest Karthi Subbaraman, the founder of ventures like Oguma and Xperian, leading initiatives like Women in Product and building an ecosystem to solve problems.
Karthi is with us to share our experience of nearly 2 decades with the universe of design. Welcome to Ninja Talks, a place where experts share their experiences just like this one. I'm your co host, Sneh.
I am your co-host Ria. Excited for today's topic? The universe of design. Thank you, Karthi.
Thank you for having me. I feel so old when you say 2 decades. But yeah, it is what it is.
So, Karthi, how is your experience with design in everyday life for the rest of us?
I don't really split design from my life. So, in many words, I don't call it as a profession or I don't understand this work life balance. First thing first. Second is, I can't split design from how I problem solve in office versus how I problem solve at home. We kind of problem solve every minute of our life in many, many ways. So my perspective is design is at the center for me. And then every other problem takes a different form and shape, and we just go ahead and solve them. So that's how I look at design, the sawdust of design or the stardust of design. One of it will be there.
Yes, I also agree with the same. Your experience with industries like pharma, e-commerce, technology, education, business. So how have you seen design evolving with these industries?
I did not see design evolve per se. Probably, we are trying to be more realized these days with design, but there is nothing like, there is something new coming. But design was always there, okay? Just that now technology is emerging, other things are emerging, so design is kind of coming to life. But it was always there because for 100,000 years or whatever number of years, human beings didn't change. And the center of design is the human part of it. And I don't think, at least for another 100 years, let's say it safely, till you and I are alive, it's not going to change. So there is nothing like an evolution per se. I don't want to use that word in a wrong way, but we are trying to use design over a period of time better. We are making our lives better and better, because when we start solving problems at one level, then we are like, okay, we arrived, and we go to level 2 and level 3. So that's how I see design being used at different levels. If you want to call it evolution, yeah, it kind of sounds like a cool word, but evolution means that things have changed. In our case, the human nature hasn't changed, just the utilization has changed, isn't it? I mean, that's my view. We feel the experience. If you talked about experience 20 years ago, people would be like, let it first work, then we'll talk about experience, right? If a username and a password worked, it's a big deal. Today we are jiggling and wiggling with it. It's a very different feeling, right? So I think we had to finish functional, reliable, durable, convenience, and now we are slowly coming to meaningful, significance, performance. It's getting a very different avatar, I would say.
So, getting involved with hands on design. So, how do you look at things between, let's say, when we talk about illustrations or artistic designs on paper versus digital design? So, how do you find similarities or inspiration versus how do you find them as a variant?
There is this idea that designers are artists and artists are designers, which is not true. Art and design are complete opposite directions. Why? Because art is always about pushing boundaries. It's kind of going outside and expressing. It doesn't care about utility or problem solving. It doesn't matter. And we give a damn about it. But when it comes to design, it is very utilitarian in nature. It's very focused on, we have to see what is in the box as well. We have to make sure that, okay, this problem is getting solved, this human life is getting better. So that is how I distinguish art and design. So when we are coming with illustrations, when we are coming with different shapes of it. For example, if you're using graphic design and if you're trying to bring graphic design into digital design, I would say every pixel that comes into digital design has to go towards problem solving. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. If the illustration doesn't make the person understand things better, then we are having trouble, right? So I can't have just like that an artwork which doesn't make sense in problem solving, especially when it comes to digital design. It depends because it's very, very contextual. So Dropbox, for example, used illustrations in a very cute way, and they were able to tell the story through their explainer video. And that said it without using many words. They were able to just use illustrations. And that's a great way of using your artistic side towards telling a story, towards solving a problem. So that way we can use, it's not the other way around. I don't think digital design is adding anything to the art world.
Well, that's a wonderful realization. Thanks a lot for that.
Great to hear that. So, as you said, design is an utility in nature. So, what is the one thing that you want to say that art of unboxing utility in nature in terms of design?
Well, let's go back to how human beings evolve, right? I mean, we are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest. We are not anything better than the other animal kingdom. But still, we are the one who are really ruling the planet in many ways, and we are also killing it. That's a different story. So when we really look at how human beings kind of evolved to this kind of power over all the species that are there in this planet, if you look at it, it was always our ability to make tools. So we we are kind of lazy, if I can use that word. So the more and more we can be lazy, we will do everything possible towards that. So tools did that to us. It added efficiency to our life. It added effectiveness to our life. So earlier, human being was making a tool, and that tool helped. And that human being was saying, okay, I did 90% of the work, the tool did 10% of work. That is what your stones, your hammers, your spears, those things did. And slowly, when you moved on, you were like 80%, 20%, 40%, 60%. Now we are slowly getting to like, I will do only 20%, let my tool do 80%. So this is how I see the evolution going to a point where as human beings, we can go to an extent where we say, I don't want to do any work, and the work gets done, right? So we want to be productive, we want to be accomplished, but at the same time, we don't want to expend energy. We are an energy conserving species in that sense. So when you put it that way, right, the one thing that we want to get to is probably we don't want to do any work, and things have to be taken care for us. And still our life needs to be run in a very accomplished and a productive manner. Definitely design is a big push towards that because it gives you the needed ability to solve those problems, isn't it?
That's a fantastic perspective to look at things. Moving on to next thing, what is the digital product design intensive structure? Your portfolio highlights that a lot. What goes behind that?
I have to tell you that that came out of frustration. I hated this term UI UX so much that I wanted to see if I can. So people started kind of using this word UI UX like as if they are kind of together. UI is just one way of really making the user go through the experience. It's just one part of it. But experience is much bigger, right? I mean, you have made a whole and a part together, and the part sometimes takes over the whole. I mean, look at all the companies, look at all your JDs. They will be talking about you should be able to do this, that, sun, moon, earth, sometimes Mars too. That's how the JDs are asking, right? So this UI UX came because a lot of people did not understand neither UI nor UX. UI doesn't exist without UX, and UX can exist without the UI. I mean, this is something we have to understand, right? So what we are actually talking about is we are either creating, we are solving a problem using one of the forms, either a product or a service or a system or an ecosystem or a space. there is some form and shape given to that. So of course, there is difference between all the forms that I talked about. So especially when we are talking about these products, earlier we called it as industrial design when we were doing physical products. We were talking color, material, finish, all that stuff. But now we are talking about pixels and how the screen, mobile versus watch versus web. That's how we are talking about. So it is nothing but a digital product design. That's all we are doing. We are not doing physical product design. We are not running a workshop, and that subject is completely different. So I wanted to talk about digital product design, and especially when we are talking about the entire process, right? Starting from the problem all the way to launching into the market. This entire process is a value creation process. This is what is called as a full stack design, right? So when you're doing a full stack design, you can't be stuck saying that, oh, I'm a visual designer, I am an interaction designer, I'm an information designer, I'm a user experience designer, I am just a user researcher. Fair. You can go ahead and specialize. But when you're saying UI UX, when you're saying digital product design, you're talking about the entire structure. And that is what I try to teach. I mean, I know that a lot of you are going to hear from the NIDs and the MITs and the other business schools as well. But I realized that none of the universities teach you this. None of the universities are able to get you ready for the industry. Industry readiness is something, I am from the industry, so I know what they expect. And people who come out of college versus what we want in the industry are completely falls apart, right? So we need to train them for another 8 months. So I thought, why don't we train them in the beginning to the end, only 8 months, and just call it done? You don't have to have that 4-year degree or a 2-year degree or whatever, right? So that is where I came up with this idea that probably we should just go ahead and do a digital product design intensive. The reason the word intensive is very important because a lot of people ask, design is one subject where you don't have to really have, it can be a self-taught designer. You cannot be a neurologist or a nephrologist as a self-taught one, right? But a designer can be. I'm like, yes, the field is so inclusive because it involves human nature. It is easier. So it is A, B, C, D. Anybody can design. A can is very important, underline. But just because you can doesn't mean that you can just like that go do it. You need to know stuff. You need to know the various subjects. It's about 7 disciplines coming together to make this whole thing possible. So that's where I started this digital product design intensive. I tried offering it via university so that I can go ahead and do just my consulting and leave the teaching to people who do teaching. But unfortunately, it looks like they don't want to take up such a long term. Everything is instant gratification, 3 days, 2 days certificate, 1 week. I'm like, no. People who want to learn this fully, I can't take for like 200,000 people, but 20 people we can. So every year we'll produce 20 designers. I don't want to complain that, we don't have good designers, unfortunately, right? I mean, so let me do my bit is where I started that. And I hope it raises the bar of design.
That's wonderful. So we can say that, okay, UI UX is actually a full stack design version of
the minute you use the word UI and UX in one breath, you are talking full stack designer, right?
So it's kind of a journey.
If you go, it is. It's a so let me go little diverge a little and really talk about business on the whole, right? If you really look at business, if you take any business, starting from your Pani Puri wala all the way to $1 trillion Amazon, it's all the same, right? There are a few things that happens. It's a repeatable, scalable process which does a few things again and again. And one of it is value creation. It creates value for the customer. For that, the customer is willing to pay. And there is value communication. You go tell your customer that I'm doing all of this for you. And you're doing value delivery. Just because you created value doesn't mean that you have delivered it all. If you created a Netflix and if it buffers every 10 seconds, I'm going to have a horrible experience, right? It works in mobile, it doesn't work in the TV. That's a horrible experience. So value delivery is important. And if you're not financially viable, then you cannot run a profitable business. So value capture should be there. So this entire value stream should happen. if you're a designer and if you don't understand what the other parts of the value does before you go into value creation, you kind of, you're kind of doing it in a dark, right? I mean, you're siloed in many ways. So shouldn't we look into how business works, right? So if you really look at a UX UI designer, especially if you're moving into the strategic side of things, right? Tactical side of things, execution, I understand. We go craft pixels, it's craftsmanship, it's taken care. But this creative, strategic creativity, that comes with business design also. It's not you cannot design a product in a silo. Cannot. You have to know who is your customer, what is the, of course, desirability, that's something that you are taking care. But you should also make sure that whatever you are saying makes business sense, isn't it? So I would kind of put, when you say UX UI, I kind of look at that person more at the strategic side and the tactical side, right? I mean, if you go strategic side, you should know the whole. So when you just use the word UX UI, it just passes jitters inside me, because I should be kind of a product manager. I should be an experienced designer. I should know UI design. Sometimes I should know how the bloody thing works on front end as well, right? How JS works and all of that. So this is a composite skill, and are we having people like that? And then we complain saying that designers are not available. You're asking for 4 planets together, and this is it just doesn't make sense, isn't it?
Absolutely correct.
Very true. So, as a forever design student from heart and mind, you believe that you get to learn twice when you teach. With educational initiatives at the National Institute of Design, MIT Institute of Design, and the Xperian School. So, you stay always grounded with realities of visibility and bring others back to authenticity. So, how do you achieve that?
It's just staying true to how the nature of things are, isn't it? For example, I mean, I used to draw this diagram. I used to ask my students, I'll put a dot there and say, if this is your status quo, after we finish the boot camp, how big your circle is going to become. Probably, let us, for the sake of discussion, we will say the radius was 1 centimeter and it became 2 centimeter. That's how much you became bigger. Let's say you went through a 4-year degree. So instead of 2 centimeter, it became 5 centimeter, right? But think about how big your ignorance, that Venn diagram is, the universal set is, right? Probably 1,000 centimeters, right? Your 1 centimeter versus 1,000 centimeter. This is the mathematics. Still, it's going to be your lifetime, right? I mean, even when the day you're going to your grave, ignorance is going to be greater than your knowledge, isn't it? We are not going to know everything. And that is when people come and say about FOMO and all, I'm like, we are born that way, we're going to die that way. Why do we even care about it, right? So all we are trying to do is, how can we use this 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 5 centimeter that I have gained so that I can add value, I can impact lives, I can make things better. That's all we can do. If ignorance is always going to be knowledge, should I be focused on knowledge or should I be grounded with ignorance? Simple question, right? So it's intelligence to be grounded with ignorance, and it is also intelligence to see how you can use your knowledge and kind of take it one step forward. So that way you don't have a choice other than to be a forever student, isn't it? And learning, as interesting as it is, I come from a cognitive science world. So I'm deeply interested in how our brain functions and all those, the biological aspects, the psychological aspects, the information processing aspects. When we really look at our brain, it learns in a fabulous way. And yet, none of our schools are having a class saying, learning how to learn, meta learning. Who taught you that? Nobody. We went through learning for 16 years without knowing how to learn. And this was crazy. The day I figured it out, I was like, oh my God, this should be the first lecture. And then we are having this period after period after period, physics, chemistry, mathematics, like that. We keep going. But how are we really understanding learning? So I came up with a formula of how people learn, or at least how the brain learns. And then I realized that specialization is so dumb. It's really dumb because our brain doesn't understand that. you need to allow your brain to go deeper, and you need to allow your brain to wander, right? We call it as a focus mode and a diffuse mode. And just by doing this, I think 20 years of my life is gone, and I still feel, oh my God, I don't know much at all. And I don't think I'm going to feel any difference even after 40, 50, 60 years, as much as I live. The better way to stay as a student is to be a teacher, because if you need to teach somebody, you should know everything about that. So I thought, okay, just by teaching I can learn better. I'm not saying specialization is wrong. Specialization is great, but the thing is, you can't be so deeply into that, so you get tunnel vision. Imagine you are a dentist and you have some 32 teeth and you're specializing for each tooth. It's possible. Our human system is so complex and so fabulously designed that it is possible that you study that one tooth for your entire life. One. Yeah. And now, if you just want to live only with that one tooth, I don't think you will be able to do a good job, right? You're having a needed breadth and needed depth. Don't be a tea which is too deep without any breadth, because if you're not able to diffuse, you would actually become a jerk. But yeah, I do respect the knowledge they bring in, but doesn't mean that that's the way to do it.
Absolutely, I highly agree with this. I feel the same. Being a software developer working in Fortune 100 company, I have been working under many senior software engineers. So I feel it's fine to have some specialization. You just gain knowledge. It defines you a certain direction, I would say, but it's not all. The more we explore, the more knowledge we gain along with the journey, and I think that is challenging and that shapes our path as well. So yeah,
only when you break the patterns you become creative, and that's the basis, right? So if for you to break the pattern, it means that you have to come back to ground zero. You have to come back to an empty state, and that you cannot be a specialized expert in your head. The hardest thing that I go through every day is to stay with that beginner's mind, right? I mean, just being empty. How can I would have worked in that domain for probably 10 years, and somebody will come and ask about it, and that morning I have to be like, okay, I don't know anything, let's start. That's very hard to have a conversation like that, and that has been definitely a struggle. It's just I'm working against my brain, right? I mean, I'm trying to tell it that don't process this information.
So moving forward, problem solving, creativity, and more. What's your inspiration or what's your energy, and how you found out your passion about design?
So engineering is all about problem solving, right? I mean, you kind of break down a big piece of problem and you get into the smaller problems, and that's how you solve it. But when I really looked at it, beyond the patterns, I was not able to go, because only things that I know I have to kind of remix again and again and again. So it was just a cocktail party, just using whatever you know. But to break that barrier and go further, you needed something else which connects this, the method and the madness should be connected, right? And the human nature is so not predictable, so sometimes totally predictable, so rational sometimes, so irrational sometimes, something that you cannot work with, versus these are set patterns, like very robotic, and I can work with that. So how do you bring these two things, the human and technology aspect? Because our customers are human beings, our stakeholders are human beings, our peers are human beings, our bosses are human beings, our subordinates are human beings. And I'm like, oh my God, I am working with a variable which I have no idea about. And I'm trying to add value to this variable, and every time it is changing. It's like working with a moving goalpost, right? I mean, that was very exciting, and I wanted to know, how does this human nature work? What is the basis of this? Between you and me, it is probably 0.1%. That is the difference in our genome structure. And look at the uniqueness with which we bring. So this was very exciting for me. So the biggest designer that I admire is the nature, the way it has created. And especially, I figured it out when I was becoming a new mother. My doctor used to do an ultrasound and used to tell how the baby is growing. She used to explain it to me, because I don't understand anything that's happening in that black screen. And she will tell me, now he's growing nails, okay? And the nail is 1/16 of the size of a rice. Yeah, 1/16. And it was like a clockwork, 40 weeks. Amazing project management, isn't it? And in 32 weeks, the baby turns. And who told you all this? And those things were like, and then when I started looking at the plant kingdom, they don't move. They don't have a brain. Everything that moves has a brain. I'm like, wow, there is a structure to this, understanding. And I started getting a lot of questions like, why is this happening? Why is this not happening? How is this working? What is the system behind it? And then I realized that human mind is an amazing subject by itself. And it is not that cognitive science alone can solve it, right? There is biological aspect to it. There is a psychological aspect to it. There is an evolution aspect to it. There is the language aspect to it. There is an anthropological aspect to it. There's a culture, society. Then there is nature and there is nurture. And I'm still at awe. I don't think I figured out anything, right? That's the design. I think that's one and only inspiration any designer needs. The idea is how beautiful things can be, right? If we can create 1,000th of whatever nature has created, I will call it a success.
That's beautiful. That's so
yeah,
beautiful.
isn't it?
Yeah. And we get to learn from all of the surroundings, everywhere, everything.
So many. And look at it. Every flower, mostly it will have 5 petals. Nothing more. Yes. How?
Very true.
Right?
Talking about humans, we gather our senses and we analyze, we visualize, we hear, we listen, everything. So most important is we visualize and we see things. How important is visualization and how to understand the engineering behind the visuals, or let's say visual engineering?
I recently talked about it in one of the community meets. The idea is, here is my latest finding. I was asking this question: if our brains are having higher visual processing capability, then why are we using words? I mean, really, if it is so easy for you to process, and the data says that depending upon how your visual is, how clearly it is articulate, it can take the speed is 1:15x to 60x, which means if I showed you an image and if I showed you a word, you would have processed that image much faster than the actual word, right? I mean, this is how our brains are built. So working with the human system, probably we should be using more and more of visuals, because it's going to be easier on the brain. We call this as a cognitive load, if I can use that jargon. So it's basically making your brain work a little harder, right? And our brain's only job is to not think. Yeah, thinking is very, very energy intensive. And a lot of us think that the brain is for thinking. Actually, if you go and ask the brain, hey brain, what do you want to do? It will say, I don't want to think, because it is super expensive for it to think. So if you can reduce the amount of processing that is happening in your brain in whatever possible ways, then go do it. And that is where visuals play a major role of coming and making it much faster to process the information. So your stimulus to your action is happening very, very quickly. And that's fabulous, right? I mean, that is where we should be using visuals. So my finding 8 or 9 weeks ago was like, the printing press that happened as a part of Industrial Revolution could do 26 characters and 10 letters. It was easy for them to play with this 36 items, and they were able to really harness efficiency and effectiveness. The consequence of that communication is we have produced tons and tons and tons of words with just these combinations of characters, right? But if you have to produce visuals, you should have produced probably 36 billion of them. It is not possible. It's not efficient. So that is what is the consequence of we going one way and completely overloading. Look at all our books. It's full of words, 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 words. And if we need to really look at it from a brain's perspective and not from an industrial revolution perspective, I think we should be more visual. That is why kids book, you find it very easy to read. Yeah, comics, you find it very easy to read. Any picture book, you will find it easy to read, right? I mean, imagine if all our textbooks, your mitochondria and thermodynamics were all taught to you in pictures, probably you would have retained most of it, isn't it? So my goal, or rather my greed, is to reduce your cognitive overload, because the more and more you're overloaded, the more and more your brain is actually screaming for help, and it will take you in a path where you will get into information abundance, information overload, information processing. You will just shut down, right? I mean, that's not a good thing.
My next question is from your initial days as senior human factors engineer, performing experience mapping to positively impacting billions of lives across the globe. So what has stayed consistent in your journey?
The core of the process, nothing has changed. To me, it is the old wine in the new bottle. I mean, it's more jargons have come now, but we always had design ops because that's the only way we can deliver. We always had design culture because that's the only way we could have creativity. We always had a value creation process starting from discovery, going into insighting, and then coming and thinking about ideas, conceptualizing, going to and setting a direction, imperatives. And then this process hasn't changed at all. And even, from your UI perspective, information design, interaction design, interface design, and then, kind of putting it together in the form of prototyping, none of it has changed. Just that the number of diagrams in the Google has changed. I stay away from all these jargons just to spare myself and my brain with more confusion. I don't actually read unless until it is a very published, and it is a literature which my colleagues and come and tell me that you have to take a look at it. Till then I don't read. So I don't have news, I don't have Instagram influence, none of this, none. So I stay pure in that sense.
That's great to hear, whether it's difficult to adopt this habit. So you have a voice and you use it responsibly to craft designers and design leaders globally via education, writing, speaking, and mentoring. So how do you visualize the future trends for the design industry, or what do you like to share with upcoming designers from a practitioner's point of view?
As I said, this is one profession which God himself did 50% of the work. He created human beings and they're not changing, right? So it's only the other 50% that we're dealing with. So the future designers and the existing designers, we're all lucky to be in this field in many, many ways. So the only thing, others have to work 100%. We need to work only 50%, which is awesome, right? So that 50%, the form and shape of what we are doing will be determined by other factors. For example, if you look at human-computer interaction, is directly proportional to the rise of emerging technologies. Now, the more and more technically we are able to do things, we will go and solve problems differently. So have an eye on how the other parameters are changing so that use that and solve problems better. So the design part doesn't change so much, but how are you able to use the other variables so that you can add more value? Earlier, for us to really make a prototype, we had to use HTML, CSS, and making an interactive live prototype was such a big deal. And then probably InVision came and said, "Hey, click through prototypes, chuck, done," right? And then Justin Mind came and said, "Okay, we will make not just click through, but a little more interactive prototyping." And now we are like, we have so many no-code tools, which is allowing us to, kind of idea to reality in just less than 8 hours. What are we talking about? Earlier, we used to spend 8 weeks going ahead and doing usability studies and this and that. And now we are like, you know what? At the end of the day, if your idea is not validated by the customer, we drop it, or we do something about it. We know what to do, we know what not to do. And this is very powerful. I'm so grateful that the other parameters, the other fields are actually helping us to propel us forward. So as designers, I think we should use how robotics is coming, how data, what we could not see in usability studies, today your analytics can say. It can give you an experience map in such a way that you can actually go and see which screen may, what happened, which pixel he was clicking, and he dropped out of that app. When was the app installed? When was the app uninstalled? All of this I will know. And that's powerful, right? I mean, you know exactly. Everybody knows what happened. A designer knows why it happened. At least you can guess, right? So go do that part better. So instead of really going ahead and figuring out what more for design, let's say this is design. Design hasn't changed, but everything else around it is changing. So how can we go ahead and make use of it? So if somebody comes and some tool comes and makes us super productive, don't be worried about it and handshake and say, great job, dude, and just keep moving on. And that's the only way we will be able to progress as a civilization. But one thing we will never be able to solve without designers is really kind of mapping all of it for the human being, right? That's our job. I think that's pretty much what we should be doing. We shouldn't be worrying about anything else.
It's amazing. Thank you for your wonderful insights. A message that you want to share with our audience?
Message. There are two parts to thinking, right? I mean, we keep talking about as a designer, we need to be creative, we need to break the barriers, and we keep talking about these things. But have you ever wondered why and how these things happen? And if you kind of look deeper, I want to share one tip with you, that you need to think with your whole body. That's the only way you can think. If you start thinking only with your brain, then you are going to take only parts of it. So if you're having an unstructured learning, for example, you are learning from your blogs, you have newsletters, you have tweets, you have threads, whatever, right? And you are kind of taking everything that's coming in. The only advice I would tell them is, please don't take everything directly. Take a drop of it, put it inside you, and if it resonates with you, right, then hold that. Reject everything else. If you keep doing this rejection process, I think you will be able to think better, and you'll be able to think with the whole body. And by just experiencing whatever the information, whether it is structured or unstructured, you are imbibing it, and go ahead and put it out there, right? You start doing it. So you are kind of using your brain. You're thinking a lot and you're doing a little. You're thinking a lot and doing a little. Thinking, doing. And this process needs to continue every single day. And if you're able to do that consistently, I think that is how you really become a designer. That is why we say anybody can become designer, because anybody who can be consistent with thinking and doing can do this. But is it easy? Not at all. You have to. It's like weight loss, right? Only you have to do it. Nobody else can do it for you. So it's like your yoga, and you have to do it. Otherwise, you don't see the effects. So because you have to do it, and consistency is a very hard thing. So go ahead and keep learning about it every single day. And if you can consistently think with your entire self and have that individuality, that this is my version, it's okay. And there could be 1,000 versions. There has to be your version to it. And then your design will speak to you. It will resonate with you. And I would say that that's how every designer should be, like totally individualistic. Otherwise, you can't create, isn't it?
That's beautiful. And with this, we come to an end of this particular episode. So thank you so much, Karthi, for being with us. This is a real good insight with your experience, and we got to learn a lot of new perspectives, a lot of new realizations, I would say. So yeah, thanks a lot for adding your valuable thoughts here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.